back to another video. Today, we're going to be covering if Appalachiosaurus can survive Ice Age Appalachia. And if you couldn't guess from the title, this is the part 2 to the Pachyrhinosaurus video. And some of you may be wondering what the hell is Appalachiosaurus. And some of you are probably wondering, why haven't I ever heard of this dinosaur before? Well, to answer the first question, Appalachiosaurus is part of the Tyrannosauria, and it lived on the continent of Appalachia. We'll cover him a little bit more in the overview. And to answer the second question, well, the reason why you barely see it mostly anywhere in media, that is because they just flat out freaking ignore it. Like, I kid you not, when I first discovered this was an actual dinosaur, I was like, wait, we have a T-Rex or a Tyrannosaurid in the east of the United States, and you're telling me barely anyone has covered this? Like, anyone. Like, there's like a lot of potential here. You could do an entire documentary series on this lost clade, or better yet, cover it. The fact of the matter is, the continent of Appalachia is barely covered in media as entirely. It's primarily just the west side that's currently covered. Like, why? Like, entirely why? I do not understand it. Like, what the fuck? But anyway, we're going to be covering 5 categories: overview, environment, food and resources, competition, and by the end we'll cover Spec Evo. Now, can Appalachiosaurus retake its crown? Let's find out. Now, Appalachiosaurus lived around 70 million years ago and roamed around in what would be Alabama and Georgia on the continent of Appalachia. Appalachiosaurus was approximately measured between 6.5 meters and 21 feet long, and it approximately weighed around 623 kilograms or 1,373 pounds. Though this is based off fragmentary remains from a juvenile specimen, which means we don't fully know what they look like or how big they were. Due to these fragmentary remains, this also resulted in some, exaggerated features, such as this reconstruction that makes it look like that one T-Rex from the 1998 Lost World film adaptation, which we do not talk about, ever. Like, seriously, what the hell were they trying to do here? So, in order to get the full weight and size estimate of Appalachiosaurus, we're going to be patching in a close relative of it, which is Basterhevosaur. By using Basterhevosaur's stats in order to fill out the gaps, we should get a relative good size estimate of what Appalachiosaurus' true size looks like. So, by using these stats, we can speculate that a full-grown Appalachiosaurus' length was around 9 meters or 30 feet long, and they could have possibly also weighed up to a ton. And now, since we got everything established for Appalachiosaurus, we can now move on to their first challenge, which is this new environment they have to conquer in order to survive. The environment that Appalachiosaurus formerly roamed around was a tropical rainforest type of environment that was extremely densely wooded. It also had a coastal floodplains and coastal lowlands. Although this is all we know about the continent of Appalachia, this is due to a certain event that happened 66 million years ago. That, and also the region suffering from heavy erosion and sedimentary problems. The Appalachian region Ice Age environment was relatively more cooler, drier, and much more warmer than today's climate, with spruce trees dominating the entirety of the landscape of the southern region of Appalachia. Also, on a very much important note, the Appalachian Mountains 66 million years ago were much more higher than today's, or Ice Age ones. By the time of the Ice Age, they slowly started eroding away and developed steep ridges, valleys, and a variety of landforms within the Appalachian region today. Appalachiosaurus will have a relatively hard time adapting to its new environment, the environment being drastically more different than its ancient tropical home. They would do a good job adapting pretty well to this new environment. They also have to get used to the new variety of landforms, such as the valleys and ridges, and especially the cold, which would probably cause havoc amongst their young. Given enough time, they could probably adapt to this new ecosystem. But Appalachiosaurus needs to do far more than simply survive in this new environment. It needs to find new food and resources in order to survive, and that's what we'll be covering next. Appalachianosaurus used to hunt down a variety of prey in their region, like hadrosaurs, ornithomimids, and nodosaurs. But now, Appalachianosaurus is now in Ice Age Appalachia, where they have to hunt down a new variety of prey and giant megafauna, such as American mastodons, woolly mammoths, Jefferson's ground sloth, giant beavers, alongside with elk, bison, and caribou. Now, the smaller animals of the Appalachian region, such as elk, caribou, bison, giant beaver, and especially Jefferson's giant ground sloth, will be easy prey for Appalachianosaurus, especially the giant beaver and Jefferson's giant ground sloth. However, Appalachianosaurus will struggle with the much more faster creatures of the region, such as the elk, caribou, deer, and bison. These prey items will be relatively harder to get a hold of than the Jefferson giant ground sloth and the giant beaver. Overall, the deer, elk, and caribou would generally be more speedier than the Appalachianosaurus, and they can also make very quick turns, which could throw Appalachianosaurus off balance. For the bison, well, the bisons usually live up into massive herds. I do see some Appalachianosauruses cornering off a lone bison and possibly killing it. For the deer, elk, and caribou, I see the juveniles having an easier time with them. Overall, they would be slightly difficult to catch. However, American mastodons and woolly mammoths will be way more reasonable to catch, but also be way more difficult. Now, Appalachianosaurus' speculative size puts it around the same height as in the woolly mammoth and American mastodon, but however, in the weight category, it's completely outmatched. The average woolly mammoth weighing between 6 and 8 tons, with the average American mastodon weighing around 11 tons. It makes hunts on the elephants way more harder on Appalachianosaurus. However, there is one thing going for Appalachianosaurus, and that's its bite. Like its distant famous cousin Tyrannosaurus rex, Appalachianosaurus teeth were not designed for bone-crunching power. They were more designed to tear and ripping flesh from its prey. Which means if they can secure a hold on a certain area, such as the trachea around the legs of its victim, it could rip away a massive portion of flesh, causing significant damage to that area. It could cause massive bleeding and severe injuries that can impede the animal they're hunting, along with impeding their escape. That and their ambushing tactics could also help take down their prey by surprise. And using the densely forested region, they can spring traps on lone wandering mammoths and American mastodons, especially the young or sick that ended up splitting up from the herd or falling behind. This Appalachianosaurus will be in a relatively comfortable spot, food and resources. However, can the same thing be said with competition? Now, Appalachianosaurus is going to have new variety threats that it has to compete against in the Ice Age. Now, the smaller predators in the region, such as direwolves, grey wolves, jaguars, and saber-toothed cats, will pose to little to zero threat to a full-grown Appalachianosaurus. However, they would cause way more problems for the chicks of the species, using their relative speed against the Appalachianosaurus to possibly snatch away 1 or 2 chicks. That could be way more dangerous than it's worth. Assuming Appalachianosaurus had a similar pack structure to some tyrannosaurids, if they didn't, they would be still dealing with very pissed off parent. That and the fact that they'll be dealing with a creature that weighs way more than them. And if the predator ends up winding up in the parent's jaws, well, they could possibly lose a limb or be disabled from hunting for a while, and the fact that they will be ended up as a free meal for the parents and the chicks. However, one of the few animals that particularly pose a threat to Appalachianosaurus are the bears of the region. And the one that would pose the most particular threat to Appalachianosaurus would be the short-faced bear, which would already be close to the same size as the spec stats we given to Appalachianosaurus. So, how would a fight between these two prehistoric apex predators go down? Well, if any of you remember that one meme between the T-Rex versus the bear, and how one-sided that fight was, it will go down like that, but except way more fairly balanced. So, who would win between the short-faced bear and the Appalachianosaurus? I feel like a majority of the time would go to Appalachianosaurus, and sometimes the short-faced bear will win. This reasoning is due to the weight and size of these creatures. The giant short-faced bear weighing around 15,000 pounds, while Appalachianosaurus weighs around a ton, which is a huge disadvantage to the giant short-faced bear. However, the giant short-faced bear is faster than Appalachianosaurus, with them able to clock around 40 miles per hour. Going for the giant short-faced bear is the fact that it has a stronger bite force than Appalachiosaurus. It's able to get a hold of something like a leg or parts of the neck. It could be fatal for the Appalachiosaurus or cause a massive injury. I mean, Appalachiosaurus is out of this fight yet, because it could be way more agile and could create quicker turns than the short-faced bear, due to its lineage in the Tyrannosauridae. Were a natural fight in the wild, it would probably be a short scuffle, with either side running off, but if it was a fight to the death, I would probably pick Appalachiosaurus for this, due to its mobility and its size. It would probably put the short-faced bear at an extreme disadvantage, possibly result in a couple pounds off of its head.
With my speed and power alone, I can surely beat him.
Ooh, look!
But so far, Appalachiosaurus has done pretty well in this new environment, but not without its own hardships though. Besides those, it would do pretty well in this new, strange time. But this will be a pretty boring video if we ended off here, so let's move on to the speculative evolution section to see how they could have adapted into this region over time. Evolutionary, quick-footed lizard. Evolutionary are descendants of Appalachiosaurus that evolved to become more nimble and more agile in the forests of Appalachia. As a result, they ended up becoming more smaller so they can catch the prey that their ancestors couldn't, such as bison, elk, and deer. And with their bulky frame, they are able to still bring down prey with relative ease. As a result of their smaller size, Evolutionary developed a coat of feathers in order to help deal with the cold of the Appalachian region, with Evolutionary having a brown coating of feathers with thin white feathers going around its neck, along with pronounced cartilaginous ridges. Males and females of the species stand around the exact same height and length, but they do have a key minor difference, such as males having a bright orange on their tail feathers and ridges, while the females only have cream-colored feather tips. During around mating season, male Evolutionary make a variety of sounds to attract a female to their location. And if a female does arrive to the location, the male will do a courtship dance using its tail feathers and its arm wings in order to court the female. And if the courting is successful, both male and female will become partners for life. Female Appalachiosauruses usually lay between around 5 or 6 eggs. As a result of this, the females become very protective over their brood. Even the males are not allowed to get close to the nest if they are a bonded pair. Appalachiosauruses tend to live in packs of 4 or 7, with the dual pair leading the pack, with it usually being the mated pair and their offspring, or other individuals within the pack. This leads to a very coordinated pack, which is very capable of bringing down much more larger and harder to bring down prey. Appalachiosauruses ended up expanding towards the upper northern parts of North America, also firmly establishing themselves across the eastern coast. When the first Paleolithic Native Americans arrived in North America, they had early run-ins with Appalachiosauruses. Many of these encounters were deadly, with early tales describing them as quick-footed creatures of the night that will steal away a hunter if they are not careful. Though while some early tribes did hunt these creatures, it did not cause a major dent in their population, until the first Europeans arrived in the North American continent. Europeans saw them as monsters and horrible creatures of the night that needed to be slain. Some thought they were made by the devil himself. Due to this, the Appalachiosaurus population took a very heavy hit, to the point where they were thought to be extinct around the late 1600s. However, there were thought to be sightings of these creatures, although these were mostly written off as hoaxes or misidentification. They would not be officially confirmed as not extinct until around the late 1980s. They would be immediately put under the protected species list, although it's relatively unknown how they were able to stay hidden for this long. Appalachiosaurus, tyrant dog lizard. Instead of staying in Appalachia, some Appalachiosauruses moved down towards the south and towards the swamps, with the swamps being somewhat familiar to the ancient landscape the Appalachiosauruses once roamed. But the dense foliage of the swamps ended up impeding the hunting practices of Appalachiosaurus. As a result, they ended up becoming much more smaller and nimbler to better navigate the dense foliage of the swamps and its terrain. This resulted in Tyrannosaurus. Appalachiosaurus has a dark green coloration in order to help better blend in with the swampy environment it inhabits. It also developed a much more wider and blockier head in order to deliver way more bone-crushing bites. Key sexual dimorphism in the species, with the males of the species having two bright red-orange colored crests, while the females do not. And during around mating season, males' crests tend to flush up with more color around this time in order to attract females, and males with less healthier or less bright crests do not get the chance to mate. Appalachiosaurus packs are very similar to modern wild dog packs, with very strong social bonds between one another and caring for another packmate. This leads to very cohesive, strong pack structures that are capable of taking down prey items such as bison, elk, and deer. And oftentimes, most of these packs consist up to 9 or 15 members. Due to all these factors, this led to them expanding towards downwards in the south, and slowly expanding up to the north, where they had their very first encounter with Paleolithic humans. Of course, both species kept their distance from one another, but eventually, due to Appalachiosaurus' sociable nature, and also following where humans left their scraps behind, they eventually led to their domestication by humans. And eventually, when the first European settlers arrived, they were shocked to see these new domesticated creatures that looked like dragons from their mythology. And eventually, they became more and more of a household pet across the world. And often not, they're more better than dogs due to their better sense of sight and keen sense of smell. It's also led into very different variations of domestic breeds across the world in modern day. Appalachiosaurus, giant smoke lizard. Instead of becoming smaller like their cousins, some Appalachiosauruses ended up going down the route of the tyrant, becoming much more bigger, larger, and powerful. This resulted in Appalachiosaurus. Appalachiosaurus had evolved a similar structure to its distant cousin Tyrannosaurus rex, gaining a much more wider body, stockier build, and much more powerful jaws, similar to its cousin Tyrannosaurus rex. They also have dark brown skin with dark green going on their back and stripes that go along down their tail and their top, in order to better camouflage in the Appalachian region. This also allows them to hunt down a variety of much more larger prey items such as mastodons, woolly mammoth, and Tachynocosaurus, which are its much preferred prey. But during the Ice Age, there was a much more larger Ice Age subspecies, would hunt down the Columbian mammoths and the ala, though after these two prey items went extinct, so did this larger subspecies, whilst the original was able to persist past the Ice Age epoch. Now, the males and females of the Appalachiosaurus species only have one key minor difference, which is the fact that males have orange crests. Besides that, there's zero to little differences between the males and females. And during around mating season, males will produce loud booming calls in order to draw in a female. And if a female does arrive, a male will do a courtship dance in order to bring in the female. And if it's successful, they usually become bonded pairs for life. Now, Appalachiosaurus rarely stick up into packs, only sticking as a pair. And when packs do form, it's usually between juveniles or very tightly raised family-oriented groups. And when they did stick into packs, this gave them better chances at claiming territory and spreading out more. And due to those factors, Appalachiosaurus was able to break out of the Appalachian region and expand its dominance across the entirety of the North American continent, which made them the most dominant predators in the North American landscape. And when the first Paleolithic Native Americans arrived in North America, they were all struck by these giant beasts that walked through the smoky plains of the mountains. Hence is how they got their name, that they also had an influence on the entirety of North American culture, inspiring great stories and legends about them. Then, when the first European settlers arrived, they were shocked to see what were essentially giant dragons, straight out of their myths and folklore. Due to this superstition and due to this fear, this led them to hunt these giant creatures. It led to massive hunting campaigns to find them and exterminate them, in order to better protect their colonies. But aiming for the adult individuals was way more trouble than it was worth. This led to the European settlers aiming for the young. Slowly but surely, this caused the population of Appalachiosaurus to nearly disappear from the Appalachian region. However, that would be far, far from the case, with them being rediscovered around the late 1800s. After the rediscovery, Sulcaconchosaurus conservation efforts were put in place. Due to these conservation efforts, they were able to regain some of their territory in the Appalachian region, regain further territory across the North American continent. Though it's a general mystery of how they were able to not be rediscovered for that long, with their rediscovery being found somewhere deep within the Appalachian region itself. But that goes to show that the world is still filled with mysteries. Thank you for watching the video. Sorry if this video took a longer time to produce and release than the other ones. It's because I was doing a multitude of different other things and also making other artwork. But a special thanks to my friends EcoSwap, Shade Garrett, Greenclaw Studios, and Baldbird. Without them, I would not have been able to get this video done relatively within the speed I was able to get it out in. Also, the artist's work I did use in this video will be linked down below, along with the music I used, along with my friends as well. So you can check out their links and socials and give them a follow, because they honestly all deserve it. Anyhow, I have to work on the next script for the other video, which is going to take me a much more longer time to produce. But since you already know me, I'm already going to give you a sneak peek. Well, excuse me, I gotta go find my daughter. See ya!